Like in the world of cars, fishing, and other sports, firearms can be an expensive hobby, but not every aspect of it has to be bankrupting, and you don't need to relegate yourself to living in a cardboard box with your Christensen arms. I've been into guns for a few years now, and have been broke for pretty much all of them. I've had many frugal methods passed on to me from more experienced shooters, and have come up with a few of my own. This presentation will cover 10 ways, in no particular order, to save money in shooting. While they are mostly geared towards sports shooters and casual shooters like myself, all of these tips are applicable to hunters as well. Finally, please note that I will not be parroting obvious points like buying cheaper guns and waiting for sales, as I find those to be self-evident though not always applicable, and I don't wish to pad the length of this already long video. And with that, let's begin. The first is a fairly straightforward one. Purchasing ammunition in bulk quantities almost always nets you with a lower cost per round, and provides you the added benefit of not having to buy boxes of ammo so often. As a demonstration, I did a quick search and found on one website that a box of 20 rounds of 55 grain 5.56 NATO was $16 Canadian, whereas from the same retailer, a case of 500 rounds was $330, meaning that while it is a larger upfront cost, it will ultimately give you more for less. As with pretty much anything in life, it is cheaper to buy used, and guns are no exception. While it is admittedly cathartic to open a brand new gun, covered in the factory oil and wrapped in about 40 layers of plastic, a quick search on second-hand platforms for the same gun with 20 rounds fired through it can shave off $100 or more, and in many cases the seller still has the original box with everything included. Having bought a few used guns myself, I wish I had done it more, as no gun stays pristine forever. So, in good condition, you won't even know the difference, apart from the smaller hole in the wallet. While targets are far from the largest expense of a firearms enthusiast, they can also be an unnecessary purchase to the owner of a printer, or one willing to take some time to fabricate their own. For example, almost 3 years ago I made these USPSA inspired targets out of cardboard moving boxes, and still use them to this day. They didn't cost me anything, and the satisfaction of crafting your own targets is certainly worth noting. And when all else fails, just shoot your empty bottles. Another fairly simple concept is that of deliberately buying guns chambered in less expensive calibers where possible. While of course it should not be the sole reason to purchase a particular firearm, it must be considered in the selection process. There are many calibers that have very similar capabilities, yet vastly different prices. For example, .222 Remington and .223 Remington are almost identical ballistically, but .223 Remington can be found in a much wider variety of rifles, and the round itself is almost always significantly cheaper than its counterpart. Inexpensive calibers, in my opinion, include, but are not limited to, .22 long rifle, 9mm, .38 special, .223 Remington /5.56 NATO, 7.62 by 39, 7.62 by 54R, and, depending on who you ask, .308 Winchester /7.62 NATO. Perhaps a strange point at first is buying the gun you actually want instead of a cheaper, less desirable alternative. Obviously this sounds counterintuitive, but allow me to explain. If you hold the mindset of buying cheaper guns now until you can afford nicer ones, not only do you just delay paying the inevitable price tag on the ones you really want, but when you do eventually get it and have to sell your holdover piece, you will likely lose money through depreciation. While I of course would never suggest going into debt or putting yourself in a tough financial spot just for the nicer rifle, diligent saving and delayed gratification will make it possible to obtain whatever dream gun you may have, regardless of income. Besides, why buy a gun you don't really want? Next up is a roundabout way of saying that you don't need to buy another gun, but not in the way your wife or mom will tell you. When interests, needs, and desires change, it is true that your current arsenal may not fit your needs. For example, you may wish to move away from deer hunting into long-range precision shooting, and start looking at buying a bench rifle. You could cough up the dimes for a factory SIG Cross or Ruger Precision, or, especially if you're just getting into it, look at your Ruger American Deer rifle, put an MDT chassis on it for a quarter of the cost, and have a great starter rifle for your new branch into the hobby, that can still be converted back into its hunting rifle roots should you choose. Another very simple trick is simply carpooling to your shooting spot of choice. For many people, the range or gravel pit is quite the drive away, and if you're a frequent shooter, the transportation costs can add up. By alternating vehicles or hitching a ride with someone else already going, not only can you reduce your fuel bill, but you create opportunities to connect and share knowledge, guns, and a good time with fellow shooters, which leads us on to our next point. Why buy stuff at all if your buddy already has it? If you only temporarily need or want to use a piece of equipment on your outings, it can be a good idea to ask to borrow it from an acquaintance instead of buying it outright. For example, if you're trying to gauge the power of two different brands of ammo, seeing if a friend at the range has a chronograph they could bring out one day, instead of purchasing one yourself only to use it once or twice, seems to be the better solution. Besides, if you end up using it more than he does, you can always buy it off him for cheaper. The last 2 points on my list are perhaps more introspective and based less in mathematical data as they are in male psychology. First is to recognize your own vulnerability to consumerism and advertising. We may not realize how fortunate we are to have firearms, despite the ongoing efforts by government authorities to remove them from us. Despite this, we seem to continue to actively amass more and more of them as if the ones we already have are suddenly incapable of the tasks that they have already been asked to perform before. The main contributor to this is the marketing of gun manufacturers, store salesmen, and even our own peers. They promise that a new rifle, a new cartridge, or a new scope will make you a more effective marksman, sportsman, or hunter. By hyping up the supposed capabilities of their latest gun or round, they slyly aim to suggest your current choices to be inadequate and obsolete, that they simply will no longer perform. By recognizing these schemes and how they affect you, you can avoid impulse buys, chasing the latest trends, and be more thankful for the gear you already have, which takes us to our final point. After everything we've already discussed, this may seem strange. Surely by shooting what you already own, it costs you in ammo and gas, right? Yes, but in the context of the previous point, it is demonstrating to you and to others that the gun you have now fulfills your purposes, perhaps the same as the new one you've been tempted to buy, and that by shooting and enjoying them, you realize that the fundamentals of the firearms hobby, the pursuit of excellence, the social aspect of range shooting, the historical significance of old pieces, are things that the importance of which does not correlate with money invested. I meet more casual shooters than myself. In one instance, a father who purchased a very inexpensive .22 rifle for his children to learn to shoot on. It was a rifle that I myself would never touch because I know of so many other, flashier, more modular choices. As a casual owner, however, he was ignorant of these other options, and was better off for it. That cheap .22 was all the rifle he had, and it was all the rifle he needed. I hope this presentation helps you as you navigate this complicated yet rewarding hobby, and I hope to create more content on this subject in the future. Until next time.